ARC Advisory Group conducted an industry survey back in 2019. We learned that out of 365 industry practitioners, 2/3 believe reliability-centered maintenance is not doing enough to improve reliability. We also learned the operations department have as much impact on plant asset performance as the maintenance organization does. So when we spoke with leaders about this in the process industries, they believe that while historically the maintenance groups have been the custodian of the overall reliability process, digitalization requires a rethinking of the overall asset performance strategy. We have found that new digital technologies can augment many maintenance, reliability, and operational processes to an unprecedented degree, and these are changing how people work. Approaches such as the Industrial Internet of Things and Industry 4.0 have paved the way for digital transformation across a broad range of industrial sectors. These new approaches have made their way into asset performance management programs to improve the maintenance and operations work process. I'm Peter Reynolds, Senior Analyst, and this is the Digital Transformation Viewpoints Podcast, brought to you by ARC Advisory Group. In each episode, we'll ask the big questions of how the world is adopting emerging technologies and practices for sustainable manufacturing, from better operational processes to blockchain. Today, however, our focus is rethinking asset performance management. So here with me today is Ron Beck, Director of Industry Marketing with AspenTech.
Hi, Peter. How are you doing today? Thanks for inviting me.
So, Ron, ARC Advisory Group conducted research back in 2019 over about a 4-month period. And basically, we did a survey of 365 industry practitioners, and we interviewed several asset owners. So one of the interesting things we learned is about 2/3 of the industry respondents surveyed either they don't practice reliability-centered maintenance, that's 22%, they don't believe reliability-centered maintenance improves return on investment or reliability, that's 27%, and assets fail randomly despite RCM, reliability-centered maintenance efforts, that's about 18%. So really, what do you think is currently happening in industry, and why is RCM getting such a poor grade?
Yeah, so I think in a way, Peter, it's not totally fair to RCM to say they're getting a failing grade there or a poor grade. You know, I think it's advanced industry somewhat. I think what's happening though is that unplanned downtime continues to be a very major concern for operators of any assets that are high capital, high value, which basically lose a lot of money for the owner when they're down.
Right.
Now, I've talked to a variety of plant managers in the past year. It's very interesting. A very common conclusion is that they tell me 50% of their safety and environmental incidents happen during startup and shutdown. You know, so basically they're trying to find ways to minimize downtime in general, but definitely unplanned downtime where you're doing all of a sudden a shutdown that you weren't expecting. Now we know that wear-based maintenance and RCM have both represented advances over the past number of years, but the reality is, as you found in your survey, that significant asset failures aren't addressable by either strategy. So therefore, right, as you found, they don't really want to continue to invest that way. And so, you know, I think there's been a growing body of work, including learnings from some of our newest work with customers, that a lot of the failures are due to other causes.
Interesting. Okay. So, you know, that brings me to another point. Another aspect of the research really looked at organizational factors impacting reliability-centered maintenance. And basically the research identified operations has as much impact on asset performance or plant asset performance as the maintenance organization. So when we further explored you know, some of the results from the survey, and we started to interview asset owners, we found that there was a lot of interest in rethinking this strategy, and perhaps, you know, some were thinking that the maintenance group has been the owner or the custodian of the reliability process, and some are really looking at an overall strategy through digitalization that not just, you know, considers better tools for the operations group, but also, you know, how the groups you know, work together. So it seems like this organizational factor in improving asset performance and looking at roles and how technology how the technology component is intertwined. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I'm not surprised with that finding and learning. Um, Definitely, I think, well, most experienced operators really know deep inside that a lot of the asset failures or equipment failures really are caused at some point by changes in the process, or we call them upsets in the process,
Right.
and that those have a big impact on the equipment itself. I mean, it's intuitively obvious that if you run a process at very full capacity for an extended time, you're going to get you're going to shorten the life of certain equipment. I mean, you could simplify it down to thinking about, taking your car at a very rapid rate of speed down a bad surfaced road, and the longer you run that, the more damage you're going to do to the equipment. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing with a plant. So yeah, so definitely, I think, forward-looking companies have been trying to figure out, okay, how do we gain more collaboration between maintenance and operations to solve this problem together? It really should be a joint responsibility, and that's held back by the, organizational silos that the traditional companies are in.
Yeah.
So that's where, like you said, and you're finding that potentially digitalization is a very exciting development here, because really what that is all about, it's more than just churning data or analytics, which are all important, but it's also about visualizing the information, personalizing it to different roles in the company, and
Mhm.
that's all in support of the concept of collaboration, which would allow, let's say, operations and maintenance
Right.
to
Yeah.
look at significant things collaboratively, right, together.
Speaking of digitalization, when we interview a lot of companies, they're all looking at artificial intelligence as a real game changer here, and asset reliability, certainly seems to be one of the most prominent cases that we've seen. So where do you see the greatest benefit, or what are some use cases to really not just look at roles, but really just to look after improving downtime?
One of the biggest use cases, and certainly one we're in the center of,
Right.
as you know, is applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to the topic of how do you predict, basically prescriptive maintenance. How do you predict that something might fail, and how do you diagnose why? And this really comes down to what we just talked about before, that a
Hmm.
lot of times failures in equipment and units in a plant can be attributable to the process conditions, and you need data from all over the plant analyzed together to understand that. And then you can find, footprints in the data that tell you, or fingerprints in the data that will tell you that something's going to fail in the future. So that's a real good use case for AI, because the amounts of data and the patterns you're looking for are extremely subtle, that an individual can't really see by himself. But AI has proven it's already finding, very subtle things that are allowing people to avoid very expensive pieces of equipment from failing. There's a couple other big use
Hmm.
cases too, like that we're starting to look at, like things like catalyst degradation in the reactors, and how AI can be applied to understanding, ways to operate that will minimize that based on data analytics and historical patterns as to how that unit is behaved. Today that's the realm of hiring a bunch of expert
Yeah.
consultants on permanent basis to tell you what to do. But there's an alternative there. And another use case is things like heat exchanger fouling and cleaning, which is very high interest right now because of sustainability drivers and things. And then another use case is actually predicting process events, not just equipment failures. So these are all good use cases, and I think the common denominator is they can be solved today. They've been proven to work, and also if solved, they have a very concrete value proposition. They're going to create concrete dollar value to a company.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So, you mentioned looking to the process, a couple of times, and I think there is a tendency, especially in heavy process and asset owners, whether petrochemical or chemical or refineries, I think that there is this aspect of system reliability and looking beyond discrete assets in order to do some of the predictions or prescriptive maintenance as you describe. But it can't be that easy, especially when there has been a tendency, in a lot of circles that would discuss asset performance management, they would focus in on condition-based monitoring and simple looking at runtime of equipment. So this approach seems a little bit different. So in terms of the challenge, shifting this paradigm from being more asset-centric to more process-centric, if I can use those words, how are asset owners dealing with this challenge and realizing the benefits of AI and machine learning?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple key challenges and pitfalls here. And so I think the tendency, especially for big companies, big traditional, energy companies, asset owners, chemical companies, refiners, is, well, we'll go hire a bunch of, well, we heard AI can help us, we'll go hire a bunch of data scientists and put them on the problem.
Right.
Well, this is really a couple companies have had some successes doing this, but I think it's a big pitfall. It's sort of going in the opposite direction from where the tendency has been over the last 30 years, where let's say a process company knows that it's really that's their core value propositions. They know how to make chemicals or oil and how to process it. They don't know how to make sophisticated software.
Right.
And so, there's been a sort of almost like a candy store approach to let's hire a bunch of data scientists, we can do this. But it's a very, very fast moving area. And so it requires a very big focus on sort of several different areas together. One is domain expertise, knowledge of the equipment and processes. The second is knowledge of the software technologies and how to apply them, and knowledge of how to handle large quantities of data. So I think that one of the key success criteria is to know where to basically use commercial fast developing technologies rather than building your own. And this seems to be an area where people have somehow been enticed into trying to build their own things and spending a lot of money. And then second part is, I mentioned a couple of use cases that we talked about a bit, but I mean, I think the key is to follow the money. Put your focus on where your company has a benefit. You might have a plant, it's not running well, a process, a type of equipment that's not working, a group of a location where a lot of people have retired and you need to apply advanced technology to substitute for loss of expertise. But I think it's doing the correct analysis to figure out where you can follow the money and get the best return on applying it, digital technologies and AI.
Right. It almost seems like there's a parallel here. Ron, let's take advanced process control, and most refining and chemical oil and gas users would be familiar with this technology. It's been around for a long time, and it seemed like there was a wave where the technology became very, very complex, and advanced process control or multivariable process control became unsupportable. And I look to these energy intensive, expensive asset type organizations, and it seems like it just seems like if I look at that role involved in that piece of technology, they're almost a citizen data scientist, on their own. So if anything, we've democratized that technology, because certainly APC is becoming easier to use and becoming more automated. Is that happening with AI and these assets as well?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So if you look at, my company as a software company, our whole goal here is we call it democratizing AI, because the goal is to really hide the data science, from the users. So where we're talking about, let's say, prescriptive maintenance, well, the users are really maintenance people. They're not data scientists or operators. As you mentioned, it should be both maintenance people and operators. So you need to hide the AI, and you need to provide the AI and the data science combine it with domain expertise, and then hide it so that a normal maintenance people will intuitively know how to operate it, or even an inexperienced person coming out of school will know how to operate it.
Right.
But that's all in the democratization process, absolutely.
Okay, so Ron, we're coming to the close of this podcast. Do you have any last thoughts for the audience today?
Well, so Peter, I get a lot of chance to travel the world and meet with our customers worldwide. And so I don't know to what extent people in Asia and the Middle East and so forth are listening to this podcast. But my lesson to the companies in North America and Europe is, the Asian companies are being very, very aggressive about looking at AI, looking at data science, adopting new approaches. And one of the things is they understand that you talked about democratizing the applications. It's also democratizing the organizations.
Right.
When you put in place these tools, you're basically putting in place the tools to make the decisions someone needs to make at a moment in time in the hands of that person in an intelligent way. So then the organization needs to become more flexible. All decisions don't need to come from the top. You empower lots of different people in the organization to make the right decisions at the right time. So I think the biggest challenge to leaders and managers is to understand this whole advent of data science, AI, digitalization, to change the way you conduct asset optimization and asset
Right.
reliability. It's not just a technology change, it's an organizational change. And the companies that take the time to understand how to really promote their organizations to adjust and promote the leaders to let go of some of the controls and democratize their organizations, this will help organizations become more flexible, agile, and those companies will become really the ones with competitive advantage because they'll be able to take best advantage of these new technologies.
Well, Ron, thanks for being with me today.
You're quite welcome. Thanks. I enjoyed it.
Thanks to Ron Beck, Director of Industry Marketing with AspenTech. For more information and insights on this topic or to learn best practices to accelerate transformation, please visit the ARC Advisory Group website at www.arcweb.com. Please do subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode, and while you're there, leave us a review. In the meantime, from Peter Reynolds, thank you for listening and goodbye.